Sekeres Price for Friday, May 24th, 2024. Coming to you from the Nation Network studio, built by Arbor Lee here at the iconic Wall Center, downtown Vancouver. Where? If you're going to an event in downtown Vancouver and you want to make it a staycation, call the Wall, 604-331-1000. Ask for the Sekeres Price rates. Some blackout dates apply. Matt Sekeres alongside Blake Price. Grady Sass hitting switches, conducting things with Sean Chessman. Big show coming up, and it's all brought to you by Applewood Auto Group.
Applewood Nissan in Langley has the 2024 Leafs. You know, the Leaf is one of the pioneers of the electric vehicle generation. $83 weekly with rebates, tons of rebates, a $5,000 one, a $4,000 one, and that's all with just $39.99 down. Go check it out, Applewood Nissan in Langley. It's all good at Applewood.
Got a couple poll questions running right now on the Sekeres Price X or Twitter and YouTube accounts. Would you trade Filip Hronek for a top six winger? Yes or no? And who are you angriest at? Messi himself, Inter Miami, MLS, or it's understandable? We will get into both those topics here in the opening block. We'll start with the Vancouver Canucks and Filip Hronek after a testy exchange with J Pat yesterday. It would have to be a hell of a top six winger for me to trade Filip Hronek for them, because Filip Hronek at his best, and we did not see that in the second half of the season, is in all situations top pair right shot defenseman, the scarcest commodity in the National Hockey League. I think if you're entertaining a trade of Filip Hronek, you either need to get a top four, or preferably top pair, all situations right shot defenseman back, or you have to have that lined up.
Yes.
If you're moving him for the top six winger. Top six winger comes with somewhat of a premium, but not close to the premium of a top pair right shot guy. And I know I sound like this week, I sound like the best defenseman Filip Hronek has ever had, but I do think there's a baby in bathwater situation here, that the player was really freaking good in the first half, and one of the primary reasons why the Vancouver Canucks turned it around. He didn't cop to an injury yesterday, but everybody who watched him in the second half of this year noticed there was an injury there, all sorts of wrapping and treatment to one arm in particular. So I'm no on the poll, Blake, but I can understand how everybody, and particularly after, I don't think he did himself any favors yesterday with that press availability. I can see why the majority is voting yes.
See, I have the exact same thoughts as you, and so I'm voting yes. Like, there are criteria in which I would make that trade. So the question is, would you? Yeah, there are instances where I would make that trade, but it needs to be with X, Y, and Z. But the question is, would I? Yeah, I could see that trade making sense.
Elliot Friedman floated Martin Necas in Carolina, who's a restricted free agent to be. He's going to get a very healthy raise, a good player. He can even play in the middle. Would you do that one straight up?
Again, thinking that they've got a right-handed shot somewhere else. Yes, I would make that trade. Young player,
but only if they have a right-handed shot somewhere else.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So right now that's a no, because free agency hasn't begun.
Right. Oh, yeah. So if you're saying, would you make that trade before July 1st? My answer is no. We didn't stipulate that. But
but you don't have a lot of time. Like, July 1st comes and that's the day. If you don't have your right shot defenseman secured then,
no, 100%.
There's probably not many of them that are lasting beyond that.
The spade work begins in the negotiation period, of course. As soon as the Stanley Cup comes to an end, you're allowed to make all those talks and talk to well, you can ask permission to talk to those teams at any point. But the free agents you can talk to for 2 weeks, and you can start to line things up. But, you've got Filip Hronek. So you're not under a Filip Hronek gun. So if it doesn't happen, then you don't make the trade.
Okay, we'll deal with the Messi matter and that poll here in a moment. But first, let's get to our top story. Year-end media availability, locker cleanout day for the Vancouver Canucks. It's a presentation of Mr. Lube, and I didn't think I could feel better about Rick Tocchet as a communicator, and then I heard him yesterday in what was an extraordinary dissertation on a couple of topics, And I got to hand it to Patrik Allvin, who has come miles as a voice and communicator for the Vancouver Canucks. I thought both gentlemen were very strong yesterday on a number of topics, particularly Allvin coming right out and basically saying, not good enough. Everybody out there may consider it a successful season, but we didn't even get halfway there, and it only gets harder from here. We'll play the clip in a moment, but I love the fact that he set expectations high after a season like this and didn't wade into some of the discourse we have heard from Canucks managers and coaches in the past about, simply trying to make the playoffs and see where the chips fall.
No, the bar has been raised appropriately after the season that was for the Vancouver Canucks, and on Allvin's communication. I mean, for anybody that was defending him previously, saying, "Oh, English is a second language. How could he?" Well, he's made something's changed in the last 18 months because his communication. I remember we were critical of him early on. There's just not enough there. You've got to be able to be a face of the franchise. You have to communicate with your fan base, and it wasn't there. And now, my goodness, he's got the world in the palm of his hand, it looks like.
I think a few things have happened here. Number one, I think he's just had more reps and he's gotten more comfortable. Also, I think he knows full well he had a hell of a year. Finalist for NHL Executive of the Year, rightfully so. So I think he's got a little bit more security there.
I also think he's got two hands on the wheel now
in himself. Yep.
He'd never been a GM. I think he only had one hand on the wheel. Jim had the other hand, I think, when he first started. I think he's got both hands on the wheel.
And I think he has moved past, for the most part, and there was some equivocation in different answers yesterday, but I think for the most part, he has moved past the fear of, I don't want to create a headline.
Right.
Because here's the thing. GMs, when they speak, especially in rabid Canadian hockey markets, almost everything's headline. And so I think he's gotten more comfortable with the dynamic.
He made headlines. They were good headlines.
Yeah, they were.
It's our top headline, brought to you by Mr. Lube. Need a tire change or tire service? Mr. Lube provides no appointment tire service and sales. Drop by anytime for rotation, repair, and balancing. And that's for all makes and models, even EVs. Go to MrLube.com.
So let's hear the first clip where he talks about not being satisfied with a second round exit.
I'm not happy sitting here today. Definitely not satisfied. We lost our last game, and it was only in round 2. To reflect on the whole season, you back it up when you guys were sitting in front of us, and Jim Rutherford said that if everything goes right, we have a chance to be a playoff team. And when Tocchet and I talked during the year, it was about the process leading up to the playoffs and how do we get better every day. And I think if you look at the segments of our games, I think we got better. But that being said, we're not satisfied at all. You don't know how many chances you're going to have to play in Game 7. And my message to the players is that this is something you're going to bear with you the whole summer, that we lost our last game, and that was only in round 2. It's just going to get harder.
Hell yeah, PA.
Mm-hmm.
Like the love in Monday night at Rogers Arena, where the fans are applauding a team that really played quite poorly in Game 6 and 7 for what everyone on the outside looking in can qualify as successful season. We've asked the poll. I mean, huge percentages agree with that. But for Patrik, we're turning the page. Players, you let this eat at you all summer and use it as fuel and motivation. So let's hear him now on the a new standard being set.
We have set the standard here now where the players know what the expectations are coming into training camp, and we got the respect back. Game 1 next year is going to be hard because we won the division. They all know that we're a good team. I think, based on the conversation I had with the players, they wanted more. They got a taste of it, and they understand now that some of them said they didn't understand how hard every single game was. That you played Game 1, and suddenly one day later you're going to play Game 2, and it just get harder and harder as we go. And I think that's where good teams, I think we talked about practice habits too, or practice habits needs to be better. The first half is about building up for the second half, and I think that's where I saw some inexperience from our players, that they weren't prepared to play meaningful games in February, March, and April. We got to be better there.
Shots fired to a bunch of the players that
Yeah.
did not have good second halves. You don't need to draw, squiggly lines from point to point to connect those dots there. He's calling out those players that didn't have good second thoughts, and those are pretty prominent players in guys like Pettersson and Hronek. But I'll say this too. Both of those clubs talk about a raised standard. That goes for the seat that he's on now.
No, but
he's put himself under the heat lamp.
But that's what I love about it.
Yeah.
Because, and we'll play some of the other clips later, and particularly the one with Ilya Mikheyev that stands out. But he is messaging not just to that player group that he mentioned, but also to Canucks fans. Like, don't look now, but a winning mentality, a winning attitude, championship aspirations are upon us. And the GM is putting himself front and center in terms of achieving those goals and aspirations. So I thought Allvin was exceptional last night or yesterday afternoon in the in his opening comments, because that was the scripted stuff before the Q&A, right? You know, you can't control what questions are coming at you, but you can control your message at the top of a season-ending press availability. Well, and I thought Allvin handled it with aplomb.
And it changes questions on the fly immediately if reporters had any questions about accountability and stuff. Well, he's already addressed a lot of it right there, and you've got to attack it from the standpoint of not expecting deflection, because he right away wasn't in the mood for deflection and saying, we were close and, we're going to get better, and just kind of the old hunky-dory sort of stuff. There was criticism there. There was criticism on almost every part of the organization. Criticism is maybe the wrong word. There was analysis of every part of the organization and its need to be better and to tweak and adapt.
Right.
And that's what you want to hear.
Now, on to Elias Pettersson, who was the one Canuck to detail an injury yesterday. He talked about a knee injury that he got in January, and that the pain increased. Rick Tocchet called it tendinitis. More on Tocchet's comments about the injury, but there was a very interesting answer from Allvin on Elias Pettersson, and I want to play that now, and then we will come back, and a lot of it has to do with his second half and the new contract. J-Pat asked the question. We'll come back and we'll unpack this answer as well. Here's Allvin on Pettersson.
I don't know what he said when he was sitting up here, but I'm sure he wasn't pleased with his performance after the All-Star break, and I think he learned a lot. I think he's hungry. He expressed it right away that he knows what he needs to improve on here in the summer, and he wants to come back and be a really, really impactful player. His talent level is unique. I mean, that doesn't go away. Again, I think this was his first playoff experience, playing every second day with traveling, and when you're being a player like him and Quinn Hughes, they all gonna play harder against you. So what do you learn, and how do you prepare yourself leading up for the second half? And I think, to be honest, some of the additions we did last summer was to bring in guys with that experience that can help us, teaching the young guys what practice habits are the first part, and I think we got to get better. I think our guys knows that you prepare yourself the early part of the season for what's coming the second part, and I think that's something that coaches we have here, they have the experience. So it's about willingness to be coached and listen and execute.
That last line, Blake, it's about a willingness to be coached and listen and execute.
Feels like he's talking to somebody.
Well, particularly because he went on Canucks Central later in the day and said, with regards to Elias's injury, I think it was something you work through. I think the medical staff did a tremendous job at getting players ready to perform. I think that's part of learning on how to prepare yourself. Now, Tocchet was very wise. He wasn't going to sewer his relationship. He's too smart a communicator to sewer his relationship with a player of Elias Pettersson's stature by getting into a he said business on the injury. You may remember on May 8th, Tocchet said, look, went out of his way, as Patrick Johnston chronicled in the province, unprompted. There was a dissertation from the podium about Elias is not injured. He's just sick. We don't lie about that stuff around here.
Yeah.
So I think he was wise to basically align with Pettersson, say, yeah, it was tendonitis. I also think that Rick Tocchet, who gets up and eats a rusty can of nails for breakfast, probably has a different definition of injury than Elias Pettersson.
By the way, rusty can of nails is way better than a can of rusty nails, because at that point you're just talking about the plate that's served in, right?
Mm-hmm. Did I screw that up?
Yeah, a little bit. It's okay.
Did you get the gist?
I got the gist of it.
Though?
I still don't want nails.
Right.
I got it.
I hear you. There were many times during the course of the season where Tocchet talked about, some days you're not going to feel great. You got to push through. In fact, there was one point in the season where Tocchet talked about he didn't like it when Pettersson missed practice or players missed practice to rest. Not huge on those maintenance days when he thinks there's a lot of work can get done there on the practice ice. How many times this year we got to practice? We got to get things right in practice. Now, look, I think there's a process for Elias. I think it was a pretty rude awakening for Elias in terms of what the playoffs are like, what Allvin just outlined with every second day and travel and, seasoned teams like Edmonton and how hard they're going to play against your top players. So I am hopeful that Elias learns from this and becomes a better player next postseason. I also think he has been challenged here by the organization and somewhat in a public manner.
Well, I think the fans and the media have challenged him too, because I
don't think they're standing for any kind of sensitivity or preciousness or aloofness or passive aggressiveness. I think that's wearing pretty thin. It certainly wore thin with Canucks fans as he went through a difficult postseason, and I would not be at all surprised if it wore thin internally as well.
I don't think it's lost on Elias Pettersson that after a season in which almost everything went right for every other part of the team through the regular season and, the 2 rounds of the playoffs, pretty good considering where this team was coming from. I don't think it's lost on Elias Pettersson that almost every other player on the team is being feted except for him. That the guys that seemed to get the criticism while he was the savior. Remember, for years, Elias Pettersson,
right,
he was the knight in shining armor.
Right.
While people were upset about the attitude of JT Miller and Quinn Hughes was small and he looked sad and
and Blake, I think he's sensitive. Like I heard from the jump, like he did not like hard coaching. Like when Travis would get into him, he would recoil.
But everybody else is getting applauded now for what they did, and it's not him. Yeah. And I think he wants to be in that winner's circle, if you will. And I mean, if you don't see it next year, well, my goodness.
And look, his parting comment about, he's looking forward to the summer because, it'd be good to get away from hearing how shit he's been. There's a paraphrase there, but the joke stands, or if it was a joke. And you juxtapose that with Allvin telling players, hey, suck on this, use this as fuel and motivation. Once again, there's a disconnect there. I know Patrick said he didn't hear what Elias had to say, but I think they're trying to root that out of the player. Like, enough of this woe is me.
Mm-hmm.
Well, like, we're not doing the self-pity thing here. We're doing the push through, be the best professional that you can, and that includes having to play through pain. Farhan says he characterized a quad injury. Farhan Lalji on TSN. And I followed up with Farhan. I said, are you telling me there's 2 injuries? And he said, no, he wasn't sure. He thought maybe Elias was calling it a knee injury, but it's more like a quad injury. Look, whatever the case, you got to take your player at their word. And you've got to also put the measures in step to make sure that the injury gets better. A lot of people are wondering about whether they could have rested Elias Pettersson. Now, it's hard to know without knowing the degree of pain, the degree of tendonitis that's there. I would suspect that they looked at it and said, look, he needs X amount of weeks or days rest, and we just can't afford to give that to him here in the regular season. Needless to say, not in the playoffs as well. So this is just going to have to be an off-season matter.
But with
others are saying, no, you had some cushion there. You might have been able
what I was going to say,
to find Elias more rest.
like that's patently just wrong. Like you
well,
had,
I don't know.
You had a multi-point
wrong.
lead. I mean, honestly, they had an upwards of 16-point lead in the second half of the season on the Edmonton Oilers.
No, but the Edmonton Oilers were charging hard, though, Blake.
Late only.
Yeah, but if you rest them and you lose a bunch of games, guess what? You've just given the Oilers the division and
they lost. They ended up losing those games anyway.
No, but you don't know that, Blake. Come on.
But still, you've got a 16-point lead on the team below you, and your star player is nursing an injury that you know will not go away unless you rest it. Like that's the prime opportunity to rest them.
No, come on. Organizations, coaches, they don't think like that.
The good ones do, Matt.
No.
Yes, they do. We see it all the time. I don't know what you're talking about. When you need
to play with fire of falling out of first place and falling out of home ice.
How is that playing with fire? If you got
because if you're sitting your best player or one of your best players, you are less likely to win.
You have a double-digit point lead,
but it didn't turn out to be a double-digit point lead.
But that was
like Edmonton was charging hard right at the end of the season.
But that was at the end.
You're not going to sacrifice your station to get the players some rest.
Matt, if we've established that the injury could be played through, that the player can play, that they can make him ready, then ergo he could be dropped back into the lineup at any second. It isn't a question of, if we take him out, he's got to sit for 5 weeks. If you sit him for a week and you go 1-2, not the end of the world. You sit him for a second week, you go 2-1, not the end of the world. You sit him for a third week, you go 0-3. Elias, it's time to go back. You've got control. You have agency. Yeah. You're not committed to him sitting a month. It's a day-by-day thing, and you get away with it as long as you get away with it. So, like, if you don't have the opportunity there, God, when the hell do you? You had a 16-point lead on second place.
Which turned into what? 3 points in the last week? At one point, were the Oilers not a point back of them?
But if you had sat him when it was flaring up the most in February, he would have been back by that point anyway. And he probably would have been a more impactful player, and maybe it doesn't get down to 3 points anymore.
Yeah, and I would say a couple of things to that. Number one, perhaps the medical staff went to them and said, this is going to be a month, 6 weeks of rest before he's fully right. You don't have a month to 6 weeks. Secondly, and we just heard from Allvin, preparing yourself to play those hard games through the second half of the playoffs. So let's say you rest him and you drop him back in the playoffs, and now he gets another knock. Well, guess what? You have to play through it now. So at some point, you're going to have to learn to play through this. They asked him to play. If Elias didn't think he could play through it, Elias would have taken himself out, I'm quite sure.
I'm not quite sure.
There's too much pain here. I just can't play. They would say, okay, we'll sit you down.
See, I think the way that conversation goes is, I'm in a lot of pain. Okay, they do all the tests, they do all the thing,
and they say it's tendonitis,
and they say there's not really anything there. There's not really anything there, and so the player doesn't feel like he can say, I can't play tonight, because there's actually not an injury to speak of.
Okay, agree to disagree on this one. How about Tocchet and the honesty that he provided? Again, I didn't think I could feel better about the guy as a communicator and then yesterday he achieved another level with me, because we're talking about a head coach who won the Jack Adams Award in a landslide victory. Now, with a lot of coaches, and Blake, you and I have dealt with some ego coaches, that would have been, my shit doesn't stink. How dare you, hockey fan or hockey media member, question anything about my program, especially the core stuff? And Rick Tocchet gets asked a question about how few shots on goal the Canucks produced in the playoffs, and about how few chances off the rush the Vancouver Canucks had all season long. And he absolutely owns it, and it is clear that even after receiving this award or on the verge of receiving this award, there was a hell of a lot of introspection that has happened with this head coach since Monday night's loss. Let's take a listen to him acknowledging that, yeah, he's got to take a look at his system and what he does.
Yeah, I'd be crazy not to. I got to do a deep dive. There is some simple things of hitting the net, working on your shot, changing angles. I mean, that's things you got to work on, and it's my job to make sure these guys keep developing that skill. There could be some system stuff there. We have some really good hockey minds in that dressing room, coaching staff. So we'll look at that stuff. I still think I still believe. I know a lot of people here like shot volume, which I don't mind. I'm not quite sure just throwing a puck at that with nobody in front. Now we got to get some guys to get to the net. We need more net front presence, things like that. But yeah, no, that I guess to answer your question, yeah, I got to look at myself and look at a deep dive. Can we give the player? I always feel that as a coach, you got to give their players something to look at, and maybe in going into the training camp, maybe something we'll work on a little bit more offensively. Instead of, I think we were heavy system last training camp. I wanted to make sure that guys knew exactly what we needed at certain times, and I think we were successful because we did that training camp. I think that next training camp might be a little bit different, a little more creativity, a little more skill oriented. That will help some guys, but the good old fashioned, we need people to get to the net. We gotta get that in there too.
It's not a black and white strategy.
There's so much I love about
like Rod Brindamore is all quantity,
yep.
and that hasn't worked out for them, right? So they don't get it. Mm-hmm. They don't score enough considering who they've got on their roster.
And
Rick will
never be that guy.
No.
And you heard there was a little bit of pushback there. Well, okay, some of it's player execution, some of it's got to get traffic to the net. But what I love about it as a leader is that, and Wally mentioned this to me years ago and was a part of his program, that when something goes wrong, head coach, the first thing you do is you look in the mirror and you say, what did I screw up? What's my accountability here? What did I not see? What should I have fixed before it got to this point? Before you go assigning blame to anybody in your charge. So to hear him say, I'd be crazy not to, I got to do a deep dive. And then also, it's clear that he's already thought about his training camp syllabus, Blake. And it is absolutely appropriate. And the next step, that creativity and skill have to be the next ingredient that you add to the stew.
I heard him say,
and bring the balance back a little bit.
I heard him say, I'd be crazy not to. And immediately what I thought of is he got jealous of watching other teams score off the rush. And was like, God, when's the last time I saw my team do that? Like,
now we're not going to play this clip, but on the rush side of things about attacking in transition, he answered that they needed more defensemen in the rush. And then he said, look, and my word's not his, it's a little bit of a balance because the profile of defensemen they have, like Carson Soucy isn't joining many rushes. Ian Cole's not joining many rushes, right? The type of profile of defensemen they have, the bigger guys, and what they ask them to do in the defensive zone doesn't always allow them to join the rush. And he used the phrase, sometimes you got to rob Peter to pay Paul, but then brought it back around and acknowledged, yeah, we've got to be better on the rush. And then said, at the beginning of the year, we got a lot of luck on rush chances. And we talked about the stat, Blake. They had the fewest amount of rush chances.
The most amount of rush goals.
The most amount of rush goals. Like mind-blowing stuff. Tocchet looked at it and went, that's not sustainable. We've got to cop to good luck on that front. And then said, we didn't get enough of the 3-on-2s, the 4-on-3s. And we were lucky to score on the rush chances that we did.
I mean, I said that somewhere in the middle part of the season. Certainly tweeted it. I'm not sure if I put it on the show, but when's the last time the Canucks had a breakaway?
Exactly.
Like had a from the center ice red line breakaway. And like it just never happened.
And those were clearly missing as the second half went on and into the playoffs.
And speed is part of that too, which they also name checked as well.
Patrik Allvin name check speed. Yep. So I just thought it was a marvelous explanation from both gentlemen about what happened this year and what needs to happen going forward, with as much honesty and candor that they could muster.
Without knowing at this point, of course, without free agency, knowing exactly what they can do about it, because they've got players that probably will have to leave and players that they'll want to bring back in. One thing, with regards to the defense, and I'm guilty of this too, we used to always try to think, well, nice to have a stay-at-home defenseman with an offensive defenseman, have the balance. And in some cases that can work. It's player dependent. But with Quinn Hughes needs a dance partner, if you will. Quinn Hughes is like, what's the celebrity dance show where you bring in people
Dancing with the Stars.
Dancing with the Stars. So he's like the best pro. They pair up a pro with a schmo. He's the best pro. But you can't just throw them with somebody that has nothing. Like, it's only you're
not going to get the best out of it.
You're not going to get the best out of it. You do need somebody that can dance with Quinn Hughes a little bit. So they have to be nimble enough. You can't have Granite Block playing with Quinn Hughes.
Which is why, Blake, when we discuss Filip Hronek moving on from him, it's not just that you need a top pair right side guy if you move on from him. You need a specific kind of top pair right hand guy.
A more nimble guy.
So you take already a scarce category and you thin the pathway to the solution even further.
It's why Tyler Myers in all of his...
Pesce is a terrific player, but he's just not an offensively inclined guy. Are you going to pair him with Hughes and do better than Hronek?
Offensively inclined is not what I was insinuating. It's about the skill set. It's about the skating. It's why Tyler Myers with Quinn Hughes, for instance, didn't work, because Tyler Myers can skate in a straight line, but he can't read and dance with Hughes, if you will. Hronek can.
So you need an agile, nimble guy, both on his skates and with the puck. That's a tough thing to replace, because first half Hronek was all of those things. Just before we get to Ilya Mikheyev and Allvin's comments there, we all remember at this time last year, it was almost a punchline in the market, big summer, right? Talking about big summer with all these different players, because let's face it, Blake, I think he was somewhere between aghast and appalled with the sort of fitness level and the level of preparation of the players last year when he took over. Like, I think it was clear to him, these guys ain't anywhere close to championship level preparation. And he drilled that into them. And a lot of them took the message and employed it, adopted it, and were the better for it. No greater example than Brock Besser. Well, this year, and this might be the Andrei Kuzmenko and Bally factor, coach says it's not just enough for me to drill that in the exit meetings. Now we're doing spot visits with the players in the summer. Take a listen.
These 30 minutes that's it. Like, it's not this it. I mean, I'm going to be in contact. I might be flying to see a couple of guys. It's was it 4 months before training? It's a 3-4 month thing. It's not, I can't get it done in 30 minutes. There's some players in there that they know they have to get better fitness. Certain guys there, they got to work on their shot. That's the feedback as a coach you have to give. But then all of a sudden, as the summer goes, it's keeping in touch, make sure your staff are talking to certain players. We did that a little bit last year, I thought. It really worked. And we're going to do it probably even a little bit more. Sending video to the players this summer, I think is really important. Mental reps. These are the sort of things you want to talk to your players for the half hour. But there's just so much more, and so I think it's weird when you lose. You don't think you're going to lose, and then when you lose the next day, everybody feels empty, right? You're not. That's the hardest part. So can you channel, can you take the feelings that you had when you lose and what ifs for your training and your motivation and how you're going to get better? That's really what the summers are for.
I'm going to guess that those players walked out of that meeting going, he's coming to visit me.
He's coming to visit me. Can you imagine? Hey, Brock. Yeah, it's Rick. Oh, hey, coach. Yeah, I'm
at the lake in Minnesota.
I'm in St. Paul. I was thinking of driving up to the lake. You got any time tomorrow?
See, I don't think he's visiting.
No,
Brock.
He's probably not visiting Brock.
But I think Ilya Mikheyev is the shot guy. I think Niels Höglander might be a shot guy and a fitness guy. I think those guys walked out of the meeting knowing which guy they are and what kind of visit they were going to get from coach.
Oh, amazing. And folks, like, this is a competitive advantage for the Vancouver Canucks. This head coach and the way he's going about this program. We heard it. Was it Rafi Torres who mentioned it to us? Forget which ex-Canuck we had on who mentioned it to us. Oh, no, it was Max Lapierre who said, don't get me wrong, I respect every coach that I play for. But when you take a look at Tocchet and you see the face, and the disjointed nose from being in fights and the scars, and you know what he achieved in the league, and you look at the shape he's in at 60 years old, and Brendan Moore has a lot of this too. You can't help but have a different respect and a different relationship with a coach like that. There's a little bit of fear factor, and it's a good thing. But he also walks the tightrope and lets you know how much he cares about you, to the point where he may just drop in on you in the summer.
Are you surprised at how
everybody be aware, coach might be coming into town any weekend?
I judged this book by its cover when he was hired. He is far more cerebral and organized than I had anticipated.
I think he is. This year is one of the best coaching jobs that I have ever seen any head coach in any sport.
But the how too, like John Tortorella's had good coaching years too, but more in the way that I had probably anticipated Rick Tocchet to be, and a more of an inspirational meat and potatoes, juicing everything out of the guys. Yeah. That's not what Rick Tocchet's about. Rick Tocchet's about the how, is about how we get the best out of you.
Honestly, Blake, I've done a lot of reading over the years on great coaches, guys like Belichick and Phil Jackson and Bill Parcells and Scotty and others. And when I hear Tocchet talk, and when I see the way he works, I see threads and veins from all these different successful coaches, Sir Alex Ferguson, in his program and what he's trying to achieve.
Mm-hmm.
Let's hear from Allvin on Mikheyev. Talk about accountability. Patrik Allvin is asked if he just has to move on from Ilya Mikheyev. If there's an NHL player there, here's his answer.
It wasn't his fault that he was put in a top 6 position. It was my fault. I don't think anybody was expecting Ilya Mikheyev to be a top 6 player. He's a good mid-6 player, and we all know guys that missed playoffs. Oh, sorry, missed training camp, especially with the injury that he had. And I mean, I'd never seen a guy working harder at his game to get better. And obviously, it's sad to see somebody losing his confidence as he did. He created chances and he played hard for us. I'm convinced that he's going to come back and provide the value that he has and the intangibles as he brings with speed. But again, my job is to put players in a position where they belong and for them to be successful. And Ilya is a good penalty killer guy, and he's a guy that could play in different positions, both sides, and I'm sure he's hungry to come back. And remember, I think his first 20 games, he produced there, and then unfortunately for different reasons, he lost, I believe, his confidence.
So a few things there. Right now, I think it's fair to say they're not going to buy out Ilya Mikheyev. They're going to bank on a bounce back. I think that could absolutely change if they need the cap savings that would be acquired by a buyout. I also think it was another example of terrific leadership yesterday from the Canucks brass and in Allvin shouldering that load. And he's absolutely right. Ilya Mikheyev is a third-line player. And of course, he does have some speed. And I know, Blake, you don't think he's as fast as he used to be on the ACL. Fair enough. But he also has speed, a commodity that the Canucks don't have in spades. He's got some size as well. Again, commodity the Canucks don't have in spades and may have less of if Dakota Joshua were to move on. So I can understand leaving the door open. I maintain a skepticism on that as we go through the summer.
The one thing that he left out there in that answer is that you said it's my fault for having in the top 6. Well, then it's even more cringy, the contract that you signed him. Like, if you think that having him in the top 6 is a cardinal sin on your part, then a almost $5 million third line player is not a great
You're right,
look.
Blake. He's blown a knee and had reconstructive surgery since they signed him. So I wonder if that is the distinction, that they thought this is a second line player, and now after the knee injury, they're looking at it going, okay, this is a third line player. But you're right. It's a fair criticism. Hey, it could be the worst move of the Allvin tenure. The Mikheyev signing, the Dickinson trade. There's not a lot of flies on Patrik Allvin's work here as a Vancouver Canucks GM, but Mikheyev right now through 2 years looks like a mistake.
Players that flourish, like veteran players that flourish after a change of scenery, to me, I'm reticent to blame them for Dickinson flourishing.
Well, I think it's less about Dickinson and more about giving up the second round pick for such little cap savings.
Right, that's where I was going. I thought you maybe thought that they acquired Dickinson.
No. Dickinson did.
Jimbo.
Honestly, Dickinson was a pretty good player in Chicago.
Yeah, he got a nice extension.
Allvin mentioned a top 6 winger would be nice on the summer shopping list, and that they have to add speed. Really enjoying following Noah Strang of the Daily Hive and Offside, because Noah had a tweet where he looked at the UFA wingers available this summer and found 16 guys who are 20-goal wingers. And it's actually a smaller group than that the Canucks would be shopping from for a number of reasons. Like, for example, Henrique and Monahan are in that group because they have played wing, but I think most people would look at them as center icemen.
Right.
Duchesne perhaps is as well. Vancouver's Sam Reinhart would be extraordinary, but I don't think you're going to have the cap space.
That would
He's
be
the top free agent available.
One hell of a hometown discount.
Yeah, exactly. I don't think Stamkos is coming here. Now, Marchessault, Gensel, interesting. Pavelski's quite old, but boy, does he, if you think there's still juice left there, he's interesting. Teravainen's interesting.
You have to view those older guys, though, through the lens of this management group is looking at a 4-year window, right? So,
probably too old.
Yeah.
A Tarasenko, a Mantha, a Tyler Bertuzzi.
Oh, not Bertuzzi.
Okay.
Not Bertuzzi.
Patrick Kane, probably too old.
Too much term and money.
And just too
Bertuzzi settled on the 1-year deal last year. He bet on himself. Warren Fogel's on that list, but he's not producing in the postseason. So of the 16, you winnow it down, there's probably 5 or 6 guys in there. Toffoli, it's funny because one of the things that I heard post-deadline was the Canucks may not have been as hot on Toffoli as some would suggest. And that's because there seems to be some questions out there about Toffoli's fit in rooms, given the number of times he has now been traded or changed teams.
Which is funny because by all accounts, he was beloved in the Vancouver.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. I think it may have more to do with coaching and
speed.
managers' comfort level with Toffoli in the room.
It's also
it's
unclear what Toffoli does well. Like it really is.
No, he scores goals in short areas.
No,
not off the rush.
I'm
not
talking in the toolbox. But if I'm allowed to finish my sentences, at the end of the night, he's got goals. Even though it's unclear, he doesn't beat anybody to the puck. He doesn't have a tremendous shot. He's got a good shot, but he's not a 9 out of 10 in any one category. And yet the bottom line is there.
Hockey IQ,
pretty good two-way profile. He's got the experience. I think you're underrating the shot. It is pretty darn good shot. You don't score as many goals in the NHL with having as much as he does having just a good shot.
I've never heard anybody say, well, guy shoots the puck like Toffoli. No. Wow. Come on. Stamkos. You hear that?
Those are other tiers for sure. Maybe I'm just nitpicking.
Apologies for not letting you finish your sentence.
No, it's more about the other guy.
Oh, for once.
Hey, what did they need more in the postseason, though? Goals.
Okay. So there's a whole lot more I want to get into from this season-ending press availability.
There's only 4 months left to look at it.
That's the thing, is we've got a number of here left. We're 45 minutes into the show here. So, and frankly, some of this we get into with PJ and with Jeff later in the show. So we'll leave those here for the moment.
Yeah.
And let Jeff and Patrick stick handle the other topics. Because I think Patrick also dropped a couple of nuggets there. I think he loved Lindholm. I think he loves the idea of 3 center icemen. I think he also knows it is going to be very difficult to procure a team with 3 center icemen and add that top 6 winger and do whatever they're going to have to do on defense. I also think he dropped something in there about not just building the best team possible, but building a team that is specific to what you have to do and who you have to conquer next season. And he didn't name check them, but I think the Edmonton Oilers are very much the insinuation there. We'll leave that and unpack that more to a larger degree in the days and weeks ahead. On Lionel Messi. And
who's that?
You've heard of him? So our other poll question, who are you angriest at? And the options there, Messi himself, Inter Miami, MLS. It's understandable on the YouTube side of things. We have the Whitecaps listed, although for me, the Whitecaps are well down the pecking order of responsible here, although I understand ticket holders who have spent a lot of money on tickets may be directing and channeling their anger that way. And I'm going to do most of the speaking on this because we know.
No.
But I don't want you. Blake calls games for Apple and MLS. For me, this is mostly a league issue, and I'm angriest at MLS and Commissioner Don Garber. And here's why. 2 reasons. As many have noted, this schedule was supposed to deliver Inter Miami to Vancouver between a couple of Eastern Conference games, and with the Copa coming up, which of course Lionel Messi has to play in for Argentina. They're the reigning world champions. So this was set up, and I'm not saying by design, but this was set up to be an easy game for Inter Miami to look at and go, load management. Let's not put Messi or Busquets or Suarez on a plane. And I guess Jordi Alba is going to still be.
I think so, yeah.
Secondly, you have a situation here where the soccer interests of one club are pitted against the commercial interests of another club. And for me, that's a matter that deserves and requires league leadership and intervention. That this needed to be something that Don Garber and the MLS folks were on the front end of, as opposed to, well, we haven't even heard from them. I mean, it's really a turtling activity so far from MLS. I hope they have more to say about this. Maybe I'm naive. There's still 30 some hours before kickoff. Maybe something can be done. But while the soccer interests of Inter Miami are not something that typically a league office would meddle in, when pitted against the commercial interests of your other club, Vancouver Whitecaps FC, and the 55,000 season ticket holders or ticket holders who are now angry at you, the league, angry at the Whitecaps, angry at Inter Miami, angry at Lionel Messi himself, there's a lot of damage done there. And I guess there was a matter last year where he was scheduled to play in Chicago and didn't make the trip. And I guess the Fire, gave everybody $250 of credit towards
the season pass or $50 for anything else.
So, for me, the 50% off the food and the vouchers for kids under 18 is not enough from the Whitecaps, but their hands are tied a little bit. Like, what more can they do? This isn't primarily their mistake.
The only fault I've seen attributed to the Caps is the marketing of this game. But what are you supposed to do?
What are you supposed to do?
Do you not market
Do
Messi?
you not market Lionel Messi? Like, that's it.
Like, of course you have to.
Right.
Yes, you're going to put them on a poster when they're on the schedule.
You have to.
So
everybody saw the schedule and went, holy shit, one of the great athletes the world over, one of the great athletes of all time is coming to our town in May.
And if you were dialed in anywhere, when the schedule was released and the excitement was there,
Mhm.
the excitement was also met by a pretty vocal soccer crowd. Is like, is he going to come?
Right.
Like the risk was there. The risk was laid out for most to see. If you
Well,
didn't see it, I don't know how you avoided that.
Especially with the schedule that Miami had. Because they're pointing forward to a Wednesday game that is more important for them.
And to
It's
be
a conference game.
to be honest, I thought they might have gotten a little bit of good news with that little niggle injury that he got
Mhm.
last week, in that he missed a game. And I thought,
Mhm.
well, there was some rest for him there then. That's good. But he got better and played on the weekend. So that was a good sign too. But ultimately, and this goes to the greater soccer problem now, we've got a lawsuit from the FIFA players right now towards FIFA about the congested schedule right now. There's a lot of soccer being demanded upon
Yes.
these players with the additional cups upon cups upon cups. And, you know, I would say in order, the two biggest games, the two biggest commitments that Lionel Messi has on the soccer calendar are to the MLS regular season and to Argentina in Copa. Those are the two biggest things. And so, strategically, that's what calls the shots here.
Yeah. And here's the thing. We have seen star European players come here to MLS, chafe at all the travel, and skip trips. But this isn't akin to Thierry Henry. This isn't akin to Wayne Rooney. Lionel Messi is next level. Lionel Messi has a level of fame that's more akin to the king, the pope, and the president than to any other sports star. And when you look at the compensation package that Lionel Messi is getting or has gotten to come to MLS, guys, we're talking about between $50 and $60 million a year in compensation, including equity in the Miami franchise. Not to mention top-ups from Adidas, from Apple.
Mhm.
Like, whoa. He was brought here by a number of stakeholders to grow the game in North America. And that's why I'm putting the emphasis and most of the blame on MLS, is when you do a deal like that, it's your responsibility to stick up for all the markets who are rightfully going to market Lionel Messi as coming to town. And I think MLS have left the Caps high and dry here. Like, Don Garber needed to pick up the phone this week and call down to Miami and say, Tata Martino, head coach, you're putting him on a fucking plane and he's showing up in Vancouver and at least posing for photographs. Because our schedule matrix has him in that market once every 3 years. This is a one-shot deal, and the soccer fans in that community deserve this. If he's got a knock and can't play, fair enough. We all understand injured players. But this is not simply a player. This is a promotional vehicle. And he's got to show up.
It's too bad, too. He's had a couple of road games where he's traveled and played 10 minutes off the bench. Not ideal,
And
but
again,
but
like,
it's too bad that could be
even
the
that
case. Yeah.
would have sufficed. You explained, look, he's not 100% healthy. He can't start, or he can't play 90, or he can only play 10. But he's going to be there. People can get their photographs. Hell, watching him on the touchline would be fascination enough, right?
Probably would be.
For a lot of people.
Great statement from the Southsiders.
I loved what the Southsiders, I was just about to go there, Blake.
Supporting the Whitecaps is our passion, no matter who they face on the pitch, rain or shine, home or away. No one player is bigger than the club they represent. It's unfortunate that many young kids will miss out on watching their idol play soccer live. They get into the congestion that I just outlined and then say, we'd like all soccer fans to take this opportunity to come out and experience a great soccer match. Take in the atmosphere BC plays and maybe find a favorite player wearing the colors of Vancouver, the city we all call home.
Well done.
So they can cheer them on week in and week out.
And I hope that's the outlet tomorrow for those who are still going, because I imagine some now won't show up. That the entirety of this exercise was about laying eyes on Messi.
You paid money. I hope.
I hope so.
Especially with cheap, because the number one complaint for a lot of sporting events is, never mind the ticket price. Once you get in, it's so expensive for food. 50% off food. I mean, it makes it a lot easier.
Right. And just lastly on this, I'm a little disappointed in Lionel Messi personally as well. And I say that because, and BMAC used to tell the story all the time about when Michael Jordan came here and he's doing his pregame interview. And Barry asked him a question about, is it easy being you? And he goes, oh, some days I wish I were you. And he went on to say, I know that every night in every building that I play in, there's a father and son that are there watching me for the first time and the last time. And I feel a responsibility to perform to my best because of those people in the stands who are here on account of me, have paid their good money to buy that ticket to watch me play and get that memory. I would like to have think that mentality and that attitude. I don't know Lionel Messi all that well. I haven't done a ton of reading about him. I don't know how self-aware, self-conscious he is of his brand. Gretzky is as conscious of his brand and what he means to people as any athlete that has ever been out there. I don't know where Lionel Messi stands on all of that. I don't even know how much he cares about growing the game. But I would have liked to have thought that some of that mentality was either in him or somebody could have expressed that to him that would have gotten him on a plane and at least just showing up for the public that paid money to come see him here in Vancouver.
And there's a world, I think it's a small world, but it's possible that he was ready to do that. And Tata Martino put his foot down and said, you're not getting on the plane.
And if that's the case, all the more reason that MLS has to call down and say, no bloody way.
Mm-hmm.
That's not growing the game. That's not growing the league. Because the upshot here, Blake, is that there are a lot of people who are going to take their frustrations out on the Whitecaps
for hiking the ticket prices. And
look, if you want to place some blame on the Whitecaps for the hiking the ticket price, yep.
But people that consciously bought those tickets should know that there was a level of risk regardless of whether he was going to play or not.
It cuts both ways.
Yeah.
What I know is I'm seeing all sorts of angry comments about the Whitecaps. And really, when you're going through the list of villains here or the list of responsible, for me at least, they are way down the ladder compared to some of the other actors and agents who could have made this a better situation.
It's the unfortunate thing that if you're not a diehard soccer fan, I get the feeling of the 55,000 that are coming. Not all of them are diehard soccer fans. Rotation is a thing in soccer. You do get rotational squads. It's like showing up at, at a random baseball game and just expecting the ace of the pitching staff to be pitching. But you don't play every night.
But to me, yes. But to me, that's where you have to have a greater sense of purpose between stakeholders, namely Inter Miami and MLS and the other member clubs of MLS.
That's fair comment.
That Tata that Tata has to recognize, okay, I can't sit Lionel Messi in Vancouver because this will be the one and only time Lionel Messi plays in Vancouver. And I'm going to upset a whole lot of people in that market. And I'm going to upset my partner in the league, that franchise. And so I have to tailor load management for Messi and rest him against the teams that we're going to play at their building twice this year, or we play at their building each and every year.
Yeah, and that's the thing.
You can't look at it strictly in terms of the competitiveness. Oh, that's a more important game because it's a conference match than this one. That's the one I'm going to sit down to. No. There's a greater game afoot with Lionel Messi.
And that's the distinction between this match and the Chicago match is that it being in the Eastern Conference, if Lionel Messi ends up playing through the end of his contract, I think he's going to play in Chicago. He's probably get back to Chicago. So.
Yeah. Well, he's certainly going to be scheduled to play in Chicago, not to mention the chance for a postseason game against Chicago.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Whereas in Vancouver, that ain't happening.
No.
He won't be scheduled here for a few more years. And unless it's the league final, you're not talking about a playoff encounter either.
Seen a lot of comments about it. He doesn't want to play on turf.
It's not turf. He has addressed this. He grew up training on turf. He played on turf last week. It has nothing to do with turf.
Yeah, and the New England turf is way worse than this turf.
I know there's still some soccer snobs that just so want a soccer-specific stadium and can't get over turf. The fact of the matter is, in North America, we play more than just one game. And these multi-purpose stadiums, particularly if they're built or renovated with public money, have to be able to serve a multitude of constituencies, not simply a soccer club.
If you rebuilt it, you could do it like the Bernabeu does it and have the fold in grass. Great, but that's not happening.
If Greg Kerfoot wants to go and finance the entirety of a soccer specific stadium with grass, so be it. More power to him, but it's not turf.
We got some breaking news.
Yes, we do. Not a second too late here before we're about to leave the opening segment, but there is a new head coach of the Abbotsford Canucks. Matthew.
Who's that?
It's Manny Malhotra.
Oh, how about that?
The repatriation of Manny Malhotra to the Canucks organization. And my goodness, I don't know that Jeremy Colton was ever a problem here for the organization, but at the same time, that's a nice ad. By all accounts, Manny was quite liked in the Maple Leafs organization for the work he was doing.
Smart guy.
Yeah.
And appropriate. Like he served an apprenticeship, right? As an assistant coach in the NHL.
Yeah.
And for those who don't know, he is married to Joanne Nash, or Joanne Malhotra now, the sister of Steve Nash.
With his Whitecap. There's our segue from a Whitecaps minority owner.
Right. And the other thing we've talked about is his boy, pretty good player.
Yeah.
Going to Chilliwack of the BCHL.
Is he still got another year of eligibility left there?
Caleb.
I'm not sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Caleb is going to play with the Chilliwack Chiefs, the BCHL.
Oh, did he only declare? Has he not played there yet?
Next year. He's going there for next year.
Yeah, okay.
24-25.
Yeah.
And somebody mentioned to me that this was a huge loss. I forget which OHL team had his rights, but they were quite smarting that they didn't get Caleb. He's a darn good prospect.
Yeah.
Going forward.
Oh, that was just announced. Again, my concept of time has out the window here. Yeah,
I hear you. Okay. Blake's Playoff Parlay Challenge. Games.dailyfaceoff.com. I go into the segment blind every day, hoping that we got good news to report because Grady, myself, the show, we have staked our lot with Blake's picks day after day. Nightly winners, they win gift cards. Round winners, they win cash. We want cash, Blake Price. How did we do yesterday in game one of the Western Conference Final? A cracker between Edmonton and Dallas in double OT.
I don't want to talk about it.
Somebody had
0 for 8?
No.
1 for 8?
No. I think I was 3, I think. It's not good. The gist of my prognostication was there, a multi-goal Florida win, but it didn't quite manifest.
Florida.
Dallas win.
Dallas got a late equalizer.
Yeah, I was hopeful, but Florida versus New York now. That's why I had Florida on the brain. And after Florida's rather one-sided victory, I think the Rangers bite back. I mean, they're on home ice. I think they
almost have to get this one, right?
And I think they do. I think they get the split. But I think they're going to open it up in order to do so. So there's going to be goals. So I'm going to go Rangers. Going to go with the over 5.5. First goal to the Rangers. They're going to surf that MSG crowd and get the first goal. And I think we'll get the most open play in that first period before they lock it down a bit more. So first period, the highest scoring period. Panarin assists on the over. Barkov assists on the under. Reinhart goals on the under. And Panarin goals on the over.
Goals on the under. I guess you're going Rangers.
I'm going low scoring. Maybe there's a goal for Panthers.
By the way, is Sam Reinhart going to be a $10 million player?
Oh, AFP has him over 11.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, it's almost 60 goals.
Wow.
And
he has had a couple of exceptional seasons. And here's the other things, guy. Like, he was the Selke candidate this year.
Yeah.
Like, he's an awesome all situations player.
That was always his game. I never thought I would see high-end offense.
The offensive explosion. Yeah. No, I mean, that's the thing is, don't just look at the goals and get mesmerized and think, oh, what a goal scorer. No, this is a tremendous hockey player.
Yeah, that's 3 straight seasons of at least 30, and obviously he almost got 60. But he was a 25, 22 goal scorer, 2/3 of a point per game, something like that. And then all of a sudden, boom.
Yeah, seriously.
That's why Bill Zito is one of the finalists for NHL Executive of the Year.
Do you guys think he leaves Florida and leaves Sasha Barkov? Because, man, do they have some chemistry.
You only get a chance to sign this deal once.
Yeah.
So
you only have to get a chance to sign this deal.
Though, got to keep that in mind.
Well,
there's that.
Not only that, you're on a good team.
Yeah.
I mean,
great weather.
You get to live in Miami or Lauderdale or, whatever part of
From West Van to Florida.
Yeah.
So
It's a long way from home, but it's a hell of a.
they're not struggling right now, but his production in the playoffs has not been amazing. 9 points in 12 games. So it's well below the regular season.
They got 42 million in cap space too, so they have every. Oh, sorry, no. They have less than that.
But they're not allowed.
I was looking a year forward. They have 19 million in cap space.
They've got more than just him to take care of too.
They sure do.
So yeah, we'll see.
No, that's interesting. Lundell's an RFA there. Bunch of UFAs as well. Okay. Menu time brought to you by Greta, 50 West Cordova. Fantastic spot to watch the game. Post game. One of the great arcades in Vancouver. Check out the air hockey and the Jurassic Park game. Very, very popular. And Papa Shot. I know I was busy during our watch parties at Greta. Did you guys get any Papa Shot? Did anybody from our crew get into a good?
No.
Was it just Quadrelli and Harmon?
So bad.
Are you that bad?
Yeah, white man can't shoot. You know that. White man can't jump. This
Well,
white man
and you're a
can't shoot.
goalie, so hands, right? Like you
Yeah.
don't really have hands.
I played on my nephew's hoop the other day. I went like 5 for 5 in a row with my son
And then
watching.
you quit,
You posterize him.
and then you just walked off the.
No, we
court.
weren't playing. I was just on my way to the car, and I took a shot. And I went in, so I kept on shooting. I went like 5
wow.
for 5. It was amazing. Then I missed.
Were you a baller back in the day?
I played a lot of basketball. Yeah,
Big baller.
not team wise, but we played pickup like 5 days a week at the.
At Delbrook? That's where my dad used to play.
Down at the bottom of Fell usually,
Oh,
or
yes.
the local
Yep.
elementary school. We go outdoors
Yep.
there.
What was your wingspan like?
Not very good, but I was very aggressive on D. Very aggressive. It was
All
Draymond Green.
You used up those fouls,
Yeah,
did
I
you?
was
Yeah,
Draymond
I
Green.
did too.
Yeah.
I did too.
I would just get rebounds and just dish it to the guards in the paint, and then I get called for traveling or
You.
what have you. No coordination
Shocked.
whatsoever.
Color me shocked.
Mhm. Let's move on to our Bet365 Best Bets, the segment brought to you by Bet365, proud partner of Sekeres Price. Canada in the semifinals of the World Hockey Championships. Play Switzerland on Saturday.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just take them straight up because there's no value there. So I'm going to lay 1.5 goals. Canada to win by 2. And it pays a plus 140.
I'm going to look ahead to Saturday versus Oilers versus the Stars.
Mm-hmm.
And the Stars dropped the first 2 versus the Vegas Golden Knights.
They did.
And you're getting money on the Oilers right now, plus 120. I'm pretty tempted. Going to go Oil. We might get Henry back into the lineup, so their depth improves too.
Yeah. Hintz may come back in.
Yes,
too.
that's true.
Yeah. Open an account with Bet365 today. Bet on a huge range of markets. So whatever the sport, whatever the moment, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Use code VANBONUS altogether, all one word. J-Pat is coming up next. And yeah, we asked him about his interaction with Filip Hronek yesterday. Northlands Golf Course. Download the free app and book tee times with a touch of your thumb. And while you're on course, open the app for hole-by-hole GPS and track your score. 6 to 90-day reservations. Jump the queue. Lock in your date for $10 per player booking fee. Limited daily availability. Check it all out. GolfNorthlands.com.
Hey, you. No, not you. You. Are you an owner-operator? You have a fleet of trucks or cars? Well, CalPro Plus might be the dedicated tire program just for you.
Free program includes exclusive deals and savings, price match guarantee, flexible financing, and preferred pricing on everything you drive.
Also, you get a dedicated member support line. That means that you can get questions answered. Also, they'll source and recommend the right tire for you, your application, and your budget.
Cal Tire's network of 260 plus stores are here to help so you can focus on the road ahead. Sign up for free at calproplus.com.
The Vancouver Canadians are back at the Nat. Catch fireworks, giveaways, and Friday nooners all spring and summer long. Get your tickets at CanadiansBaseball.com.
Our next guest brought to you by the Arnold Palmer Design Whistler Golf Club, now open for the 2024 season and playing to rave early season reviews. Tee times for any time during 2024 can be booked online now. And if you have a group of 12 or more, you, the group organizer, plays for free. For more information or to book online, visit whistlergolf.com.
Playoffs are over for the Vancouver Canucks, so that means we go there, right? That means we go see Al.
We are
And
going
the
to
crew.
see Al. We
Yeah.
are going to go play golf at the Whistler Golf Club, and hopefully Jeff Paterson can join us, the host of Rink Wide Vancouver and our Canucks reporter, who was in attendance yesterday, asking all the questions of all the particulars. How you doing, Jeff?
I'm good. I was just doing a quick head count in my mind there. You, Blake, and Matt, and Al. That's 3. And yeah, if you
There's
need
an
a
opening
fourth,
there. And you usually are the best representative of our
Indeed.
group, so it's probably best you do come. Yes.
Yeah.
We Matt and I have not. Al is imposing, so we usually don't impress when we're up there.
2 sports star, right?
Yeah.
Golf and basketball for Al Chris Manson. Jeff, let's start at the beginning yesterday, because you and I think, judging from the column I saw you write, both struck by Patrik Allvin finally saying, okay, now it's about winning a Stanley Cup. Now it's no more about meaningful games in March and making the playoffs if everything goes right. The goalposts were moved yesterday, and in a good direction, by the Canucks GM.
Yeah, I've been impressed with Allvin almost every time out. He seems to just get a little more comfortable, a little more, finds himself in his voice, where I think where he was when he took over as the general manager and deferred to Jim Rutherford. No, it was forceful. The city's still basking in the afterglow of what was a terrific month. It was a ton of fun. 13 games. They provided these memories. We talked about all of those, and most of the players reflected on all of that. And Allvin comes out, and I kind of thought maybe that would be the start of his address was, hey, it was fun. We covered some ground. We made some progress, but I'm not happy. Instead, I mean, he hit the ground running there with his opening remark of, I'm not satisfied. This was round 2. And I thought, good for him. Like, really good for him. That it sets the tone for the organization. It sets the tone for the offseason as these guys scatter for the summer. It sets the tone for what they can expect when they arrive here next year. He's been to the top of the NHL mountain. He's been a champion in this league. He knows what it takes. And while he and his group did a lot of good things this year, ultimately they got 7 wins where 16 are necessary to outlast all other comers in the Stanley Cup playoffs. And so, yes, they made progress, but there's still a lot of work to be done. And I thought that was sort of my ultimate takeaway from Allvin at the podium. I mean, him and Tocchet there, and in the past, generally it would have been sort of a 60-40 split. I think questions handled by Rick Tocchet, but this was more the Patrik Allvin show. And part of that is that we just haven't had access to him for a while. He, took a back seat through the playoff run here. And so there were lots of questions about, what we've just seen, but obviously what has to be done now to get from here to there, because clearly he has established that there is plenty of work left to be done.
That's just it. And he was pretty open about some of the work that needs to be done. And I heard more talk about wingers than I did about D, which stands to reason to some degree, because that's the obvious hole right now. But the question is, do they have holes on D in the summer if guys like Zadorov and Cole are not brought back? So what was your takeaway on what he was going to focus on in the summer to make sure that it isn't only round 2, as he put it?
Yeah, I mean, he was asked point blank, what's your wish list? And he said a top 6 winger and speed. So clearly he recognizes what I think we all ultimately recognized at the end, that they were a forward, or at least one forward short. But yeah, look, he also said his biggest challenge is going to be fitting 23 players on the roster, which suggests that he knows that he's got his hands full in terms of the salary cap and, dead money on the books and some of the other obstacles that are there. It's not going to be as simple as just running it back with this group. And it's not about running it back with this group even. It's about building on this group and making them better. So it is a challenge, certainly. And you're right, Zadorov. How can they afford to let this guy go? Pay him what he wants. He's just too good now at the podium and dealing with us. But, we saw the love affair that developed between the fan base and the player. They've got a decision to make, obviously. And there are others there. The one thing, and I suppose we hear this every year from every general manager, I want to resign all my free agents. I want to believe that we can promote from within. I'd be willing to buy into that a little bit more if there was an NHL player in Abbotsford knocking on the door. Now, some people might say, hey, Vasily Podkolzin's not a game changer. And I think the book is very much out on him as far as, or at least the jury's out on him. What can he do? He comes in, he works hard, he hits people, but they need more than that. And this just feels like a really make it or break it summer for Vasily Podkolzin. I know they committed to him on a team-friendly deal, so there's some certainty there for him, but it's go time for Vasily Podkolzin. And beyond that, like Arshdeep Bains, nice story, but in the end, it didn't move the needle at the National Hockey League level. There are others that will be given an opportunity, but this is where there's still a gap. Lekkerimäki obviously has some work to do, and I think they'll give him a look, certainly a long look in training camp in the preseason. Willander's still a couple of years away, so it's not like there are a couple of hotshot prospects down in Abbotsford knocking on the door, waiting for their opportunity. Artur Silovs was that guy, and he made the most of his. But in terms of the forward ranks, there is going to be some work to be done. And then you're right; it's how do the puzzle pieces move around? Who can they afford? Who do they elect to commit to ultimately? And what can they do with whatever money they've got remaining there to try to address some of the weaknesses and make this team better? Because again, 50 wins on 109 points, it was great, but it was on the backs of so many guys having career seasons. You can't always bank on that. And so it's about insulating some of those players and making the group better collectively moving forward.
You mentioned that he name-checked a top six winger in speed, and yet, Jeff, at a couple of times during the session, he talked about how there are different ideas on how they want to structure a team. At one point, he said that he still needs to have more conversations with Rick Tocchet about that. And then when he evaluated the playoffs, he said he thought the goaltending and back end was amongst the best in the playoffs, that he thought they were really strong in the middle, and added, that's something we have to discuss, see how the formula works. It sounds to me like he's a little bit torn right now about trying to be three deep down the middle and having that as the strength of the team, or sacrificing one of those centermen and going with a winger and a more traditional top six.
Yeah, that was my read on that as well. And look, we can do some easy math here. Elias Pettersson's contract kicks in. JT Miller isn't going anywhere based on his contractual situation and the season that he just had. And Elias Lindholm's future is very much up in the air. And so it's a question of, where do you want to allocate your dollars? And if you pay down the middle, then again, it's going to make it difficult to adequately address what's on the wing. And look, I asked him the question flat out about Ilya Mikheyev, and I thought it was a fascinating answer when he said, hey, that's not Mikheyev's fault that he was a top six guy. That's on me as the guy that builds this hockey club, except that, they had the trade deadline, their hands were tied there, and they continued to utilize Mikheyev higher in the lineup than he should have been through all of his scoring struggles. So, yeah, I understand where Allvin's coming from, but at the end of the day, Rick Tocchet can only play the players that he has available to him in a cap world, and Ilya Mikheyev at close to $5 million didn't produce for this hockey club. But, a pretty throaty, I thought, response from Allvin about what Mikheyev can be if he's slotted in the right place on this roster and in this lineup. I'm not sure that I fully agree, but again, we'll see if he's back to start next season, or if he's a guy that somehow they can, magically make go away with the cap contribution that he takes up. So we'll see where it goes. But look, at the end of the day, they didn't get enough from the wings. Some of that was on Elias Pettersson, not making the guys around him a little bit better. But ultimately, we said coming out of training camp when Phil DiGiuseppe made this team in the top six, like right then and there, back in September into October, there were red flags about what they had on the flanks on this hockey club. And that included Andrei Kuzmenko, who we all thought would score a lot more than he ultimately did before he got moved along. So there were issues way back when, and a lot of those issues remain. And I think that's a big part of the challenge for Patrik Allvin and his staff here over these summer months.
They've been creative before. I do get the feeling, listening to the emotion of Patrik Allvin, Jeff, I can't help but think they've got something creative and big up their sleeve. And I don't mean to say that to get Canucks fans excited. I just think that's going to be their way. I think Jim Rutherford is on top, sort of instructing that to some degree. I expect to be wowed, and it may not be unanimously excited wowed. I think it might be a debatable move at some point, but I do get the feeling they're going to do something creative and big to change the face of this roster a little bit.
Yeah, and then, that leads us to speculate. If they don't want to commit close to $8 million to Filip Hronek? Can they find a trade partner? And what do you do with that money? It's not even so much what you get in return if you were to pull the trigger on that trade. It's what do you do? What's the opportunity cost here of moving Filip Hronek that quickly after, peddling significant assets to get him? But if you don't want to commit that kind of dollar figure to him, what can you do with that money? So, can they get a player that they could plug in elsewhere and then address their defense needs with some of the existing players they've got at lower price points? When you heard Tyler Myers, again, I truly believe that Tyler Myers wants to be back here. I think Tyler Myers played some of his best hockey as a Canuck. He's not going to get anywhere close to what he's been making for the last 5 years, but he's not going to work for free either. So, it becomes, who do they value? Who do they prioritize? What is the dollar figure ultimately on a guy like Nikita Zadorov? But if you move Hronek, 18 months ago, you thought you had addressed this massive glaring organizational need of, mid-20s right shot guy. And if you peddle him, can you go out and find a partner for Quinn Hughes at $3 million, say, that can give you essentially what Hronek did over the second half and into the playoffs? And I think that there are ways that you could identify some players that they would like that could come in and do a lot of those types of things. So again, these are the questions that all 32 teams are going to have to face. 4 of them probably aren't dealing with them right now because they're still playing, but the other 28 teams that either didn't make the playoffs or been eliminated, they start into their off-season planning now. And, it already sounded like Tocchet had submitted a wish list, that Allvin had met with the coaching staff. I think for the Canucks' sake, we're so conditioned to them finishing in early April and having 2 months leading up to free agency. But when you play to the second round and into the Victoria Day long weekend, you've effectively eaten up a month of the offseason. So there is a lot of heavy lifting to be done here in a shorter than usual amount of time for the Vancouver Canucks.
You brought up Hronek. There was an interaction with him yesterday, be it brief. You reflect back on it. What do you think happened there with Filip in your line of questioning?
Yeah, I'm surprised and I guess a little disappointed sort of how much has been made of this, but this is the world we live in, where I see other websites writing separate stories about reporter and player getting into a fight. It was 20 seconds? It was pretty innocuous. Ultimately, I thought there was pushback on both sides, and I guess it speaks to how little of that ultimately we see over the course of a season in today's world. You guys have all dealt with athletes. We don't always agree with what they have to say, and I'm sure they don't agree with the line of questioning an awful lot. Again, this is a guy that has made a decision, and it's a strange one, and it's unique in North American sports not to speak to the media, and we have respected that. We knew that about him when he was acquired by the Vancouver Canucks. And that was my first interaction with Filip Hronek. I've seen him in the locker room, but I had never asked him a question. And I just thought, it's fine if he chooses to operate the way that he does in the regular season. But the minute you agree to sit at a podium with a microphone in front of you on what is essentially a media day, guess what? You're going to get some questions, especially when your contract's up. The reports are that you want $8 million and your play dipped and your production cratered over the second half of the season. And that was really the question I was getting at. Mm-hmm. I asked him about the injury. He said no. I would have loved to have talked to him when things were going great in the first half of the season. I would like to have talked to him in the second half when things were starting to slide. I would have loved to have talked to him because Patrick Johnston reported, but anybody that's been in the locker room has seen his arm was taped so heavily. In fact, I haven't seen a tape job like that for practice and for games maybe ever in 25 years of covering the Vancouver Canucks. So, I asked him about the injury. He said, no, that's fine. I don't fully believe the answer. But look, Ian Cole was asked about an injury. He didn't want to talk about it. Quinn Hughes deflected. These guys are pro athletes. They don't want to get into that. Fine. But then I asked about the production over the second half. And when he said, if I knew, I would have changed it. Well, guess what? You better damn well know what went wrong. The organization better figure that out. If you're going to get $8 million, you can't be the player that was there in the second half and in the playoffs. They need the guy that was there in the first half. So, I didn't think he tried very hard with his answer. And I let him know. I was sitting in the front row. We were right there. He tried to stare me down, which I kind of thought was laughable and could have done without that. But again, and I didn't lose any sleep over it. I can tell you that. And I'm sure he didn't either. We've gone on our separate ways. We won't see each other until training camp convenes, and he probably won't do media then. So it was Like, was it a little awkward? Perhaps. But again, I think it stands out just because we don't get a lot of pushback in this day and age. And I think that he could have done better. And then I found it quite funny that, he didn't give Drance much of an answer. Certainly didn't give me much of an answer to my question. Then when Farhan asked, I think he recognized that maybe third time should be the charm and actually answered the question about playing with Quinn Hughes and the opportunity that went along with it. And really, that's all I was asking for was just, again, we don't make you do this song and dance all season long, but this is media day, our last chance to talk to you. I asked what I thought was a fairly pertinent question. And the other thing to keep in mind, because I get all these people on Twitter coming at me and telling me it's just the stupidest, ridiculous thing that's ever happened. That's fine. I can handle that. But the one that I loved most was, I don't care what he says to the media. I just care how he plays. To which I would
care a lot.
How did he play in the second half? Well, he didn't play very well. Why not? I don't know. Let's ask him. It's just, that's kind of where it all comes from. And anyways, it's just this whole song and dance. I will say this, though, that I was told after the fact by a Canucks staffer that they have worked with him, that through the year they've worked with him. They have asked him to be more engaging. They've asked him to try. And that was his choice yesterday.
You chronicled the Hughes and Cole answered questions about injuries and deflected a little bit. But look at the different ways in which they did that. Like, no one came around from saying, prickly Ian Cole, prickly Quinn Hughes. There's more than one way to skin this cat. I can't believe that he either didn't listen to the preparation or that the team didn't prep him with a 15 to 20 second answer. 15 seconds. That's all. That would just be like, guys, I'm not interested in talking about an injury. Like, it's as simple as that. He doesn't have to give us any details, but there's a way to do it politely, and he chose not to.
Jeff, what do we make of the Elias Pettersson injury, what he had to say about it, and juxtaposed to what Tocchet had to say about Pettersson and his injury status, either during the second half of the year or yesterday at the podium?
Yeah, that's mildly concerning to me because Tocchet always talks about his open door and his relationship with players and all that kind of stuff. And I'm willing to believe we all watched that wasn't the same Elias Pettersson over the second half from the All-Star break and through the playoffs. Like, I do think he was playing through something, and I think he tried to pull us into his world a little bit with an honest answer that the knee was bothering him. And then for Tocchet to just downplay it, throw a bucket of cold water all over it, there's a disconnect there somewhere. Like, somebody isn't quite giving us the full story. And again, I'll go back to the player ultimately knows best about his body. You have to trust the player. The other thing, too, is if you think out of the All-Star break, they had that hellish schedule of 10 games in 17 days with all sorts of travel. And it was becoming apparent then that he wasn't at his best. Was there not an opportunity to sit him down for a couple of games? And even if they wanted him to push through then, you had the 9-game homestand in March where he didn't have to get on a plane. He could have had all sorts of rest and recovery and treatment and all those types of things. And there were some minnows on the schedule, right? There was that stretch where they played Buffalo and Montreal and Washington and Anaheim at the end. Like, you're telling me by then they had to recognize that this wasn't the same guy. And playing through whatever it was wasn't working for him. Could they not have sat him down for a week at the very least and seen if there was some sort of response? They gave him a maintenance day the day before the Anaheim game, but otherwise he played every night. He practiced regularly. I don't know. That one seems strange to me. It was almost like there wasn't a full belief that the player was. He didn't want to play like that. Come on. We all know he's a better player. So something was up with Elias Pettersson.
Yeah. Of course, during the season, you were probably there. Tocchet said something along the lines of he didn't love players resting at practice. That he has talked about pushing through a whole lot. And then there were a couple interesting answers from Patrik Allvin on that. His answer about Elias Pettersson, and in fact, I think you asked the question, Jeff, about expectations that come with the new contract, and he talked about he's sure that Elias wasn't pleased with his performance after the All-Star break, that he had learned a lot, that he knows what he wants to work on this summer. And then, and in fairness, he broadened the answer and talked about young players. And then had the line, it's about a willingness to be coached and listen and execute. And I understand in a radio interview he did later in the day, Canucks Central, he said, I think it was something you worked through. I think the medical staff did a tremendous job of getting players ready to perform. I think that's part of learning on how to prepare yourself.
Yeah.
Boy,
I agree.
I mean,
it all
just
sort of sounds disconnected to me. So,
right. I mean, it just sounds like they may have a different definition of injury than Elias.
well, they've committed to this guy a lot of money
Yeah,
and
they
a
sure
long
have.
term, and this is who they've got. And they all better get on the same page here because he means a lot to their success. They're going to stay on top of him, obviously, to deliver now that he's commanding the money that he's getting here. So, yeah, I mean, look, he's a mercurial guy. We get that. But that felt, I mean, my takeaway there was it felt a little heavy-handed from the top that maybe they didn't believe everything that their star player was telling them.
To be fair, guys, there is that gray area where a player is not doing any further damage necessarily. Like he's not going to completely injure himself by playing on it, but it's hampering him enough that he's nowhere near the player that he needs to be. And I think that's where Elias Pettersson sounds like he was, where he could go out there and he could be a National Hockey League level player, but he couldn't be Elias Pettersson. And they've got to recognize, and I hope that, bring this all the way back to the first answer on Patrik Allvin, Jeff, that maybe next year, rather than aiming for the playoffs and throwing everything they can to make sure that they make the playoffs, maybe, and I'm not saying they're going to get to Nikita Kucherov, park him in December levels, but maybe there's decisions made throughout the course of the season. They're a little bit more angled towards, let's make sure that we are ready to go April 15th or whatever day the playoffs are. That's the most important time. We got to be good enough to make the playoffs, obviously, but we need to be ready come playoff time, not spending every ounce of energy in order to get there.
Yeah, I think that there's something to that, and that all comes with the findings of progression. And I think as an organization, they got locked into this idea of we might be able to win this specific division, and it was do that at all stops. And ultimately, yes, you wanted Game 7 of the second round against the Oilers on home ice, but how did that work for you? And in fact, home ice through the playoffs really wasn't much of an advantage for the Vancouver Canucks. And so whether it's Pettersson or whether it's capping Thatcher Demko and the number of starts, yes, I think this is about when Patrik Allvin says we've set the standard. I think that's on the ice, but it's got to be off the ice as well. I think it's now about taking this group, surrounding them, getting them better. And it is, how do you get those other 9 wins or a good chunk of those 9 wins that were missing rather than getting excited about the 7 wins ultimately that you did get through 2 rounds of the playoffs?
Yeah, there was so much in that season-ending presser, Jeff, and we've got all summer long to talk about it. We'll let you go for now on this because we've gone long enough, but we'll check back next week and get to some of the things that we left on the cutting room floor here because there's a significant number. I thought, honestly, that was one of the best press conferences that a Canucks GM and head coach have ever done in my 17 years here.
But Jeff's right. He gets better and better every time he gets to the podium.
Allvin is getting so much better that you almost wonder whether Rutherford is redundant, but then you remember the last time that there was a direct line of reportage from GM to owner, and that didn't work so well. So, Jim, keep Francesco at bay, get the practice facility done, and then let Patrik do all the talking and Rick as well, because I think they're both exceptional communicators. Allvin has come such a long way. And
we should say, Jeff, thank you for a wonderful season of Rink-Wide Vancouver. Now that is officially put to bed for I know there'll be some content still from Rink-Wide Vancouver, but in terms of the post game and such, a fabulous season. So thank you for that.
Yeah, I appreciate that, and fun being on with you guys. And you're right, the season's over, but the talk, it never stops. And short, off season a little shorter than we've been conditioned to in years gone by, but still a lot of hot button issues. So we'll catch up again next week.
Jeff, that's a good thing. That's a good thing.
It is,
we needed a shorter summer. Great Clips is the official hair salon of the National Hockey League. There are 37 salons in Vancouver and the Lower Mainland, all Canadian owned and operated. Download the app and find the nearest to you. When you're up next for a cut, you'll get a ready next text. Great Clips. It's going to be great. We've all heard of the overdose crisis, also known as the toxic drug crisis.
But did you know that it affects men disproportionately?
Last year, 78% of people dying here in BC were men, and the majority were 30 to 59 years old.
It's not easy to struggle with addiction, and the stigma around it can make it harder for people to reach out for help.
there is help and support. Every journey is different, and the thing that helps one person, it might not be the same for everyone.
So when someone does reach out, be compassionate and have open, non-judgmental conversations.
We here at Sekeres Price want to be part of the solution.
If you or someone you care about is struggling, you can find supports and services near you at helpstartshere.gov.bc.ca. And you can also watch powerful real-life stories of recovery on Help Starts Here website. In a season like this, you never want to miss a single second of what's happening on the ice, and you want to be around your fellow fans, right? Well, Greta Bar YVR at 50 West Cordova, the perfect spot to do so. Hey, if you've got tickets, a great place to pre and post. They've got drink specials every single day. And if you don't have tickets, well, stick around and soak up the atmosphere with all your fellow fans, play all the great video games and air hockey, great air hockey setup as well at Greta Bar YVR. We'll see you there, 50 West Cordova.
Well, there was plenty of unpacked from Patrik Allvin, Rick Tocchet, and the players yesterday. So today, J-Pat, PJ, our two guys on the Vancouver Canucks beat join us, including his nibs from the Province and Post Media. How are you?
I'm well. I'm
good to see you.
I still feel like I'm like kind of
Hear
just
you.
recovering from the week, like it's just
That
the
was a long week.
game, the drain, trying to get yourself. Oh, what are we doing here? What am I doing today? I still have to write more stories. Like, what's going on?
Right. Gonna sleep well this weekend, Peach.
Well, are you looking after my children?
Well, they're not getting up in the middle of the night anymore. Come on.
No, it's true. No, it's fine. They're good. They're good kids.
Hey, Blake can. He's down 2. He needs
It's
to.
true. Yeah, Blake, you want to
Exactly.
revisit 4 and 6?
Yeah, I really miss all of that.
Exactly. He's
Yeah.
go make him whole. He needs the cohort back. Want to start with, honestly, Peach, I said at the top of the show, I wasn't sure I could be a bigger Rick Tocchet fan in terms of communication, in terms of honesty. But when he is asked about the lack of shots on goal and the lack of rush chances that his team produced this year, and he goes on an answer talking about he'd be crazy not to look at his system, and that, I mean, he wins the Jack Adams, and it's clear there's that instead of being like, oh, I'm the cock of the walk, like there's already been a whole lot of introspection about the way he has coached this year and what may have to change going forward.
Like, honestly, truly one of the most fascinating people in hockey, I think.
He is. Yeah.
Like, you have this perception of him. What was it? 92, 93 had 45 goals and 200 and something penalty minutes. Like this sort of the power forward of power forwards, right? And he's incredibly introspective and brilliant and thinks about the game endlessly and is aware of how much he doesn't know. He does not deal in certainties, which is so, I mean, that's rare in life, but it's rarer than anything in hockey.
And Patrick, there's not a morsel of insecurity there either. No. He's willing to bring others into the conversation. And we just benefit as hockey fans listening to all of this.
That was one of the things, certainly in the playoffs, as Edmonton media, or there were at least a couple people from Nashville covering the team. They're kind of like, wow, you guys are really lucky. I mean, mid-season, I remember the Sharks coming in. Randy Hahn just looked at me and goes, you guys are so lucky. And he wasn't even complaining. Like, they had David Quinn, who was actually a pretty good interview, right? But we have these 15-minute press conferences every day because he was happy to talk. And you'd ask a technical question and he'd give you the technical answer. He was happy. There was no terror of, oh my God, the other team's going to figure out our secrets, because like he knew the shot. Everybody's looking at you all the time. So they've already figured out what you're about to say. So it's not, so there was a lot of that. It was just absolutely. And I mean, I asked him a question sort of about regrets. Like, is there something you wish you'd done differently? And he just wanted to talk about Game 7. The things that were missed, he didn't necessarily get into the lineup necessarily, but, what if Mikheyev puts the puck in the net? What if our power play isn't atrocious at the end of the first period? What if we'd scored a goal? How could I have settled the guys differently? On and on. Like, as you said, Matt, like, just absolutely already thinking about what went different. I mean, the other thing people never see this because he's great. We all kind of stood up and, we did congratulate him for the award and, kind of break the fourth wall a little bit there. But he's happy to chat. I mean, I think as Jeff mentioned, talk to him, he stands there and he was probably still in the room for another 10 minutes, 5 minutes at least. And just happy.
But it goes beyond just being easy for the media guys. I think fans get closer to the team and closer to the conversation.
Yeah.
Because of it.
He's a real person and he's comfortable in his own skin and he's walked everywhere there is to walk in hockey at this point.
Do you think, did you hear, I didn't hear this answer. Do you think they, and this could be for Allvin or Tocchet, do you think they concede that very much they were the second best team in the series? Do you think they saw that? Yeah.
Yes. Oh yeah. Mm-hmm. Well, like Allvin, I mean, to his credit, I think Allvin's grown as well. I wrote about this. That was my take. I think was to write about management. And, he has gotten so much better at this. He actually does. I mean, obviously he has talking points, but he actually does give you answers. He answers them in the way he wants to answer them, but he doesn't shy from the question. Mm-hmm. And his opening statement that he is not happy to be there. And it's because we've lost, I'm like, he hammered that point home and that was it. And yeah, they were not good enough. He knows it. He taught the answer on Mikheyev was brilliant. Like, that's my fault that he's playing too high in the lineup. Like, we believe in the player, but he was in the wrong role, and that's on me. Like, yeah.
The one misstep for the coach at the very least, and maybe to some degree Patrik Allvin, was in talking about Elias Pettersson and reconciling what the player is saying with their own feelings. So let's skip over some of the fine points of it.
I would dispute that. I would push back on that. I don't think it was a misstep. I think they got their points across without sewering the player. I think they walked a very fine line there.
Okay. Let me ask you the tough question here, Patrick. If Rick Tocchet had $11.5 million to spend, would he spend it on Elias Pettersson?
That's a great question. I don't know.
I don't think he would.
I don't think he would. I think listen, and that's not to say he doesn't appreciate the player and what the player brings, to be clear. He I don't think is an Elias Pettersson hater. I think he just looks at other things and God, you guys are setting me up for the quote of the day.
That's what it boils down to, though.
But it does. It's a great question. It's an absolutely fantastic question, and certainly, the injury, as described. I mean, I've never dealt with it. I know people have dealt with it. It stinks, and yet, it is going to affect your skating stride. But what happened to his shot? Like there's elements of play that were difficult. And there is a bit of a reckoning, I think, at the end of the day that Pettersson's going to have to face.
Yeah.
Like, who does he want to be? And how does he deal with this stuff? It's a big challenge. This was the toughest, without a doubt, the toughest season of his entire life, let alone his pro career. Mm-hmm. And serious questions were asked of him, and not just by us, but by his team. Like, the team needed him to be more than he was. And it's going to be a challenging, it's a huge question. I mean, he talks about not wanting to make headlines, and like, well, the truth is performance is the ultimate headline, and the performance wasn't good enough. So, and the coach knows that, and the GM knows that, and they signed him in good faith, and they want to believe that management would not have signed him to that deal if they don't believe in him and what he's going to be. They want him to, he's a centerpiece. There's him and Miller for eternity now, right? Mm-hmm. Like, that's the thing. They have set this table up, and they need it to be how it is for at least as long as Quinn Hughes is here, which is 3 more years.
Well, so they could sign the player as asset management. I mean,
yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But you need the player to perform. I mean, if your decision is to move on from him, but you simply got him under, as a secured, the bag's secured, like, you still need him to perform, right?
Sure.
So
to a certain level, so that he's tradable and all that.
Yeah. So that's what I mean.
Few things. Lower body does incorporate the shot.
Sure.
Farhan report said on Jay Onright's show last night, he heard of a quad tear as well, which was really curious to me. Why wouldn't Elias have outlined that?
Well,
And there's
so
part
the
of me that
interesting, like, sorry, go ahead.
no. Oh, I was just going to say there's part of me that wonders in listening to Tocchet and Allvin yesterday that maybe they just have a different definition of injury than Elias Pettersson.
Yeah. The quad thing, I mean, I guess Farhan had mentioned it at me at some point.
Mhm.
And I said, like, I heard midseason there was a groin issue.
Mhm.
He doesn't want to talk about injury, so he would always dispute that.
Right. But the other thing that I think it's I think Elias being as mercurial as he is, aloof, the passive aggressiveness. We talked about that last week, if I'm not mistaken. Wearing a little thin with Canucks fans, particularly when you're not producing in the playoffs. I wonder whether that's wearing a little thin internally as well.
Oh, I don't think there's any doubt about that. I think that the mentality is always a challenge, and when the mentality is a little bit woe is me, or at least that's, I think, a bit of what we're seeing is
I just don't think
deal with
Tocchet
your shit, man. That's it.
Yeah.
And that goes back to the question of Blake's original question is, you want someone who's, in the end, you want someone who's grown and come to you the way JT Miller has.
Mm-hmm. I just
you don't have to be JT Miller, but the path that Miller has walked the last year and a bit since Tocchet has arrived is remarkable. That there's a player who's found trust in a coach, and a coach who's helped him be a better person.
But guys,
I just don't think Tocchet buys. I just don't think Tocchet is loves big lower lips and self pity.
But I do wonder if Elias Pettersson has learned from this that when something is not right, when you are at 80% and it's affecting you greatly, do you not have the strength, or do you not feel comfortable enough going to the staff and saying, guys, I think I need a week here because I can't be the player I need to be with my body in the current shape. Like, I know it's not an injury, there's no surgery required here, but I can't be the player that I want to be right now. And maybe a week is going to help here. They say that the therapists all told them, oh no, we can work through this. But I mean, the evidence is there on the ice, isn't it?
Pride goeth, right?
Yeah.
I think there's a huge element there, right? Just, I'm not weak. A little bit said I'm not weak, I'm not soft, right? Like, it is oddly enough exactly what you want from a hockey player. But if you can't,
it gets to folly. It gets to your own detriment by doing it.
It's a difficult line to walk. The player wants to play. You've got to give him the best advice he can, especially when it comes to things you can, quote, play through.
That's right.
Right.
Yeah.
There's
a gray area there when it's not a quote unquote injury. And again, this goes to the definition of injury. But if you've got something nagging that is severely impacting, I guess you're injured.
I think there's a lot of, I think there's let's be clear. There's a lot of sympathy here. The coach cares about his player. That is the thing that stands about Tocchet. He cares about all these guys, right? He wants them to be their best selves. He wants to help them be that guy. As I was saying, we have these chats as we're stepping off, and we're talking about. He was actually asking us if he has to go to the NHL awards because he's already won his award. What actually gets handed out, and then he pointed out
live in the town where
that was the joke, and this is so. And he points out, it's not just the North. We're like, wait, the Lady Bang actually gets handed out. Petey's got to be there, and he's like, listen, I feel bad for the guy because he wants to go back to Sweden, and now he's got to come all the way. Yeah. Can you just host everybody at your house? And he just started laughing. He's like, you know what? That's a great idea.
For anyone who knows Vegas, traffic on the Strip is a bitch. If he doesn't want to have to drive down from Summerlin or whatever suburb that he lives in,
that's it.
I hear you. I'm with you, Coach.
Poolside. Petey wants to sit poolside. We know he likes Palm Springs. Come on.
I want to get back to Allvin for a second, because to me it was clear that he really liked three centermen And when he talked about the structure of the team, I think he's, having the debate right now. Do we want to be strong 1, 2, 3 down the middle? Or is that going to unduly hamper our ability to add the top 6 winger that I think is obvious he needs, right? Probably the biggest glaring need.
That was the number one with a bullet thing.
Right.
I asked him and he said that's what we needed, a top 6 winger.
But later in the presser, he goes on and talks about how the goaltending in the back end were worthy of a cup, how the play down the middle was really strong. That's something we have to discuss to see how the formula works. And then he adds also, what type of hockey are we going to see next year? And he goes on to suggest that they might have to build a team to counter their divisional foes, and namely the team that just beat them, the Edmonton Oilers, which to me is a really sophisticated view of team building. You see this all the time in the NFL, where NFL teams go, well, we got to get through these 3 teams to win our division, go to the playoffs. So how do we construct a team that's, can stop that quarterback or is better against that great defense? It sounded like to me that a lot of this summer might be, how do we construct a roster with the available cap space we have that best gets us over the Edmonton hurdle?
Yeah, well, I mean, that goes back to what we were talking about earlier, Tocchet's answer. Him talking about needing to be better on the rush. Like he said, he basically said it. He knows they need to be better on the rush. There are things that they did not do that we all talked about that he is very aware of. And so is the general manager. And, the football comparison is great because, there's an overall philosophy, I think, in this organization of looking afield, looking around, seeing what else is there. Talk it in the fall. Talk to us in one of these post-scrum chats. I think Jeff's referenced this one before, but talk to us about essentially building the playbook and said, look, in the NFL, they get that huge book and they don't start at the back. They start at the beginning, and the stuff at the back is basic from, you have to build it up. And that's why they spend so much time. Obviously, they have way more practice time than we do. But he was basically suggesting that where they were at in their defensive system in the early days of the season was not going to be where he hoped they would be by the end of the season. And there was a lot more stuff happening, but you had to, in many ways, just get the reps in. And so thinking in those terms is already in the organization. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And Allvin looking at I mean, he clearly would like to keep Elias Lindholm. Like there's a way, right? And, I do wonder, like, not just the interaction with us, but Filip Hronek's future, just how, like, does he really fit? Can you, obviously was a great partner for Quinn Hughes, but like there are other defensemen in the NHL. Like, can you find a way to do that in a different way? If you want to keep, is there any way to keep Zadorov? Like the way Zadorov played was as good as advertised, but what's the price, And so is there a way to find him? Now you're back to the money ball. How do you rebuild this all in the aggregate? Right? Like that's the way you have to go.
First half, Hronek was worth his weight in gold. Like one of the primary reasons why this team turned it around.
And
that's
then he got injured and he doesn't want to talk about it.
Yeah, no, that's not one I relish.
But also maybe you just talked about the system getting more progressive too. Is that part of the reason why Hronek's production went down? Does he not fit into the system as well as it got more complicated and got more nuanced?
I mean, if you read between the lines at times, like there were Tocchet would talk about, there were a couple games I remember where he talked about basically, people hammering the puck on passes. And I just was absolutely certain he was talking about Filip Hronek. Like,
yes, he was.
Yeah, right. So there's just elements in the game. Obviously, you don't knock someone for not being perfect. Right. It's the Matt and I know this well. Don't make, when you're writing a story, don't make perfect the enemy of good. Sometimes you just have to file the story.
Right.
But when you're trying to build a hockey team, and you have a few months to think about this. Yeah. Like you have
it's a great line, Patrick. It's also, particularly on Hronek's side of things. Okay, if not him, then whom? Yeah. You're on the market for the scarcest commodity out there. The all situations top pair right shot defenseman, which brings me to our poll question. Would you trade him for a top 6 winger? I guess Elliott has floated Martin Necas in Carolina for Filip Hronek. What do you make of that?
I mean, Martin Necas is a heck of a player. Yeah, if that's a deal you can make, that whether it was a direct trade or just taking the Hronek space and applying it somewhere else.
That's right. Yeah.
To me, that's always been the most obvious.
But you need that plan. You also need that plan.
Yeah.
So I was saying on yesterday's show, if you trade Hronek, trade him at the end of July when you've secured the fill-in right shot defenseman.
Yeah.
Via free agency
or trade him for a different right shot.
You probably have to trade him for an older guy. You'd probably have to trade him for a 28, 29-year-old guy. Yeah.
Perhaps. Lastly, for me, it doesn't sound like he's willing to buy out Ilya Mikheyev. That was a pretty staunch defense of the player and put the onus on me. But of course, they weren't talking about buying out OEL at this time last year.
That's right.
You took the words out of my mouth, right? Like that was clearly something they were talking about, but they weren't. He knows how to play his. Allvin knows how to play his cards, right? Like he will say, "Oh no, this player still has value. This player scored 1 goal in 61 games, 62. I lost track in the end. Who couldn't put?
So did he.
Touche. Yeah. We'll see. I still think there's a useful enough player, but the hands were always a problem. The hands are now turning into a Louis Eriksson problem. He can at least, his skating was vastly improved in the second half of the season. It's just a lot of money to pay a guy that doesn't score.
That's the biggest problem. Yeah.
Sorry, I lied. I had one more question.
Oh, I'm always excited.
Are you a disappointed ticket holder for the Caps and Inter Miami? Where are you going? No.
I mean, listen. I got some buddies. We do have some. We have some season tickets that we share around. We were hopeful because, of course, it probably would have paid for the rest of our season, but it's whatever. I mean,
I hope you sold them before yesterday.
No, we hadn't. No.
We're sitting on them. Okay.
No. So a couple of guys are going. No, in the end, I thought Martinengo's take was right. Like, listen, this is going to happen, but to have it happen 2 days, there's a lot. I don't know how you fix it, but you got to be more realistic on things like this. And
well, fantastic season talking to you, and we will continue to talk to you, Patrik, through this spring and into the summer as well. Just absolutely love having you on the show, my dude. Thank you for this, and we'll catch up next week.
People keep asking me, so do you ship to other sports? I'm like, no, the beast doesn't die. People want more Canucks.
Do you know where you are?
Month a year business. And like what I find most amusing about it is everybody in the hockey world has sort of gotten together and said, okay, we don't work August, right? Okay.
Yes.
Nobody's working August, right? All right.
Four good weeks.
Four good weeks.
Anyway, I'll end up on the Lions. So everyone knows I'll end up on at least one day at the Lions, and I'll probably do a couple days of the Whitecaps, and I can weigh in on the next. 2 years ago, I was literally there for Nathan Rourke's return to standing on the sidelines with his walking boots. So I got to write that story. So,
wow, there you go. And of course, we'll see you at Nat Bailey because we know
absolutely
you love Nat Bailey.
Yeah, boys.
As big a smile as he has on this show, you should see him at Nat Bailey when he's got a cold beer in his hand.
Yeah, thank you.
Take care, guys.
Hey, everybody! If you're enjoying what you're seeing here, then follow along with Sekeres Price on YouTube. I promise more content coming.
The kids call it subscribe on YouTube.
Well, how about liking it?
Do that as well. Smash